Well, good morning. Welcome back to Tales of the Silk Road. Before I get started, I'd like to welcome a visitor, Brooke, a visitor today whose family comes from Uzbekistan, from Bukhara, which we'll be talking about next week. So Alex, welcome. Carol, welcome. The other thing I'd like to do is I'd like to thank whoever it was that donated two very interesting books to the book giveaway. One on Tashkent, which is the topic of today's talk, and one on Uzbek miniature paintings, which is very interesting. So whoever that was that donated those, thank you. Somebody said it was Susan giving my stuff away, but I had not seen it. I had not seen them before. So anyhow, thanks very much. So today we're continuing to move westward. Last time we were in western China, Kashgar, and now we're going across the mountains into Central Asia per se. I want to talk today about four areas in Uzbekistan. The first is Fergana Valley, and during Silk Road days, the Fergana Valley was very well known as the source of the heavenly horses that were very important, particularly in Chinese trade. Today, it's best known for silks and ceramics. I should add to that a large degree of ethnic unrest, which I'll talk about a little bit in a minute. Tashkent, the second place we'll talk about, is the capital of Uzbekistan, and it's particularly interesting from the point of view of it displays a number of architectural styles from the Timurid, that is from the times of Tamerlane, through a lot of Russian style into a lot of extremely interesting modern buildings.
Oh, isn't it Seattle's sister city?
I'm going to say that. My teaching assistant is helping me. Tashkent is Seattle's sister city, and I'm going to talk to that specifically when I talk about Timur's Museum. So thank you, Susan.
Oh, you're so welcome.
Remind me of something I'm not going to talk about. Okay. Then the third place I'm going to talk about is Nukus, which is way up in the northwest. To say that it is out of the way is an understatement. But it is known for an outstanding museum of Soviet art. And that's why I went there. I went there both the first time I was in Uzbekistan and I went back the second time simply because I hadn't seen enough of the museum. And I'll talk a little bit about that. And then finally, I'm going to close by talking about the Aral Sea, which is north and west of Nukus, and basically represents one of the really greatest ecological disasters of the 20th century, and I'll explain why. To orient us, the visual is posted in the elevators leaves off about half the stuff. We're going to start here in the Fergana Valley. We're going to go to Tashkent. We're going to go to Nukus, then we're going to go up to the Aral Sea. So beginning with the Fergana Valley, to orient us, it's basic. Basically tucked here in the Tian Shan Mountains. Kashgar is over here. And you can see here's Tajikistan, here's Kyrgyzstan, and the Fergana Valley just extends right into here as part of Uzbekistan. If we were coming from the east from Kashgar, we would go across the Turkic Pass here to Osh in Kyrgyzstan, and then into the valley. The way I went was I was in Tashkent and then went from Tashkent in and then out to Osh. I won't go into a lot of detail about border crossings, but I will point out that one of the things that's particularly important about the Fergana Valley is ethnic conflict. You can see here that it is basically an isle of Uzbek people surrounded by Kazurs and Tajik people. Here's Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan here. I couldn't do it, but one could do easily an hour on the Fergana Valley and the political situation there. Let me just say that in the 1990s, there was a considerable degree of unrest because of Muslim extremists, Islamic extremists. Hundreds of people were killed. More recently, there has been conflict between Kyrgyz from here, Tajiks from here, and it's a hotbed of political unrest. When I was there in 2014, I went from Tashkent through here. There was an inside Uzbekistan task force control. It's very closely guarded as to who is able to go into that area simply because of the political unrest. And as I say, that's a topic that one can spend a lot of time on. At one time, there was a county there, and this is in the city of Kokand. This is the Khan's palace, and the typical tile work that we'll see much more of as we move further into Uzbekistan next week. This is the interior of the palace. This is... Sorry, I've got a new pointer that I'm not sure exactly how it works.
Where'd you get it?
It was a gift from Walton Bow. Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. So just an example of very ornate woodwork and painted walls to give you an idea of some of the luxury there. So currently, the Fergana region is known for the silk production. This is an existing silk factory using hand looms as were done centuries ago. These are ECATs. And if you heard Rebecca's talk the other day, these are hand-loomed ECATs. I've got a couple that were machine-made, and most of them now are machine-made. Here you can see a weaving machine, and again, the ECAT design here. I listened carefully to Rebecca's talk, and I still can't figure out how to do it. And I'm very much looking forward tomorrow to going to the Seattle Art Museum and seeing the exhibit there. But yeah, so this is one of the things that the Fergana Valley is famous for, is silk production. Here you see a number of examples of ECATs, and these are all silk. The majority of them now you get are cotton. The ones I've got are cotton, and there's something about the design and the technique that I find really fascinating. And as I say, I still can't understand how they do it. In addition to silks, the Fergana Valley is very famous for ceramics. Here you see ceramics that come out of the kiln that are waiting to be painted. A couple of examples of platters here. There is a very well-known and famous master potter there. These are simply some of the people who worked with him and illustrating some of the quality of the ceramic work there. You find really interesting ceramics throughout Uzbekistan, but clearly this is an outstanding center of ceramic production. And if you'd like to bring some back with you, here's a display in a ceramic shop that's affiliated with one of the potters there, and just incredibly brilliant, incredibly detailed design. Very, very, very interesting stuff. Heavenly horses. This is, if you were here for my Silk Road talks, I talked about the heavenly horses. This is just an old painting of the heavenly horses. They're referred to as the heavenly horses, the celestial horses, or the blood-sweating horses. And they were favored by the Chinese, and a lot of were shipped back to China. These are some Tang ceramic statues of horses, and here's what they look like. This is actually, this is an example of the current, the breed itself has disappeared, but this is a close relative of the old celestial horses. And this is in the Fergana Valley. If you like horses, they're really beautiful. So any questions about the Fergana Valley? Ceramics, horses, silk, and ethnic conflict. Yeah.
What accounts for those jagged borders, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan?
Brooke's question is what accounts for the jagged borders. It's a combination of the geography and where people live. If we went back there, it would be logical to lock off the valley from Uzbekistan, either Kyrgyzstan or Tajikistan, but it was settled by Uzbeks, and that's part of the political issue. Very good question. They follow two things: the geography or the geology, and the ethnic settlements. Okay, so Tashkent, moving to the capital. Tashkent is, during the time of the Soviet Union, it was one of the largest cities. It was likely the second or third largest city in the Soviet Union. It is the capital of Uzbekistan. It was the capital of the republic during Soviet times. As I said, there is a real mix of Islamic, Soviet, and modern architecture, and the history of political intrigue. This is one of the places in the Great Game that I've talked about. This was kind of one of the key places in Central Asia, along with Bihar, during the time of the Great Game. It was the capital. Here's a statue of Timur. This is the Emir Timur Maidoni, that means square. This is in Tashkent. You can see your basic old Soviet architecture here. We're going to come down into this area. I've been doing pretty well with this lately, but not today. We're going to come down into this area. This is Independence Square over here, but this very large statue of Timur here in the square. This is the statue up close. This is Hotel Uzbekistan, and it is shown here. It is an old tourist hotel. If people went to Uzbekistan during the days of the Soviet Union, this is where you would stay. It's in the form of an open book. I have no idea how many rooms there are there, but it's huge. And as I say, that was the in-tourist hotel where foreign visitors would stay. This is the new Emir Timur Museum in Tashkent, and it's basically the Museum of the Timurid Empire. It is very interesting. This is the entry hall. This is a replica of a grandstand that's actually in Samarkand, where this is a smaller version of that that was in the Emir Timur's mosque there in Samarkand. We'll talk about next week. But these huge murals, you can't really get an idea of the scale, but these are probably 25, 30 feet high. One of the things that was interesting to me in the museum was the fact that, as Susan reminded me, Tashkent and Seattle are sister cities, and in one of the display cases, there was a sculpture by a Seattle artist that was presented to the city of Tashkent that is now in this museum. But what was particularly interesting to me is that the sculptor, in fact, from Seattle, is the brother of the guy who was the dean of the School of Public Health when I was at Texas, Beasley. And we have a large sculpture of his in the courtyard of the School of Public Health. So one of the small world things here I am in Tashkent, looking at a sculpture by the brother of my former dean. This to me was probably the most interesting museum in Tashkent. This is the History Museum of the Peoples of Uzbekistan, modern Soviet architecture, and has a wide range of exhibits going all the way from Stone Age Uzbekistan to Uzbekistan today. One of the things that was fun the first time I was there was there were lots of school kids there. And you know, for some reason I don't look like I could be probably not an Uzbekistan resident. And I have probably pictures of a number of kids' cameras posing with me and practicing their English, which was great fun, both for me and for them. The other thing that's interesting about this is that I was there in 2014 and then back in 2018. In that time period, most of the labels had been changed. They were in 3 languages to begin with, or 2 languages, Uzbek and Russian. They're now Uzbek and English, showing a transition away from the Russian influence, and a number of the displays have been modified as well. So what the museum looks at is history and architecture of the whole country back all the way from Stone Age times up to today, and there's a lot of contemporary things that have to do with the change from being part of the Soviet Union to independent Uzbekistan and the 25th anniversary of that. But you can see a replica here of some Timurid architecture. I can't remember which madrasas those are. Lots of ethnographic art, or ethnographic items. You can see here musical instruments, carpets, ikats, stone tablet, grave marker, and so on. Close to there is Mustaki Madroni. This is Independence Square, and this was established as a park to mark the independence of Uzbekistan. Prior to independence, it was referred to as Lenin Square. There was a huge statue of Lenin in the square, which was taken down and replaced by this monument right here. Here's the background. But this is where the independence, I guess, of Uzbekistan was celebrated. This is the Independence Monument, and you can see this is a mother nursing a child. The second time I was there, you couldn't get that close to it. I'm not sure why. I didn't bother. There was a guard standing all around, and I learned you don't really usually ask guards for information, particularly if they're carrying big guns. But the thing is, here's a world globe, and the only country that's shown on it is Uzbekistan. So there's Uzbekistan here, and the mother and child. And the mother and child celebrates growth and the idea of freedom and beginning anew, if you will, just like a baby, like a child. So if we go from independence, go along to if we were looking at that statue, this would be off to our right. This is the Parliamentary Supreme Chamber. Again, this is one of the old Soviet buildings, but this is this huge square. It was basically a parade ground. Most of you probably are familiar with the fact that the Soviets like to demonstrate their military might by running tanks down the street having people march around, and that's one of the things that took place here. As I say, in Soviet times, it was Lenin Square. Lenin disappeared, and the new thing was established then. But lots of fountains, lots of color. It's interesting that Tashkent has lots of parks and lots of fountains, and it's basically an oasis city in the desert. But they've got lots of water. This is a newish madrasa, just showing some of the more modern Islamic architecture. This is an older Timur time date mosque in Tashkent, and again our familiar blue tile domes and the high entrance there. This is a little museum not too far from the hotel where I stayed when I was there the last time. And if you look carefully at this, you'll see something kind of interesting.
Oh.
This was the home of a Jewish merchant. There was the largest Jewish populations in many parts of Central Asia and Uzbekistan. Bukhara is particularly well known for its Jewish population. But this was the home of a Jewish merchant, which was subsequently converted and is now a museum of applied arts. So as a museum of applied arts, you can see here, this is the interior. This was the original to the house. They have lots of carpets, lots of metalwork, and of course they have a souvenir shop. And it's interesting too, in Uzbekistan, at least the first time I was there, 2014, I think some of this may have changed more recently. You could not take anything out of the country that was over 50 years old or of cultural significance without a certificate. And so the museum, if they sold you an old carpet, would give you a certificate so you could get it out. My experience was that I bought a bunch of coins, and as I was leaving the country to come back to the States, they saw the coins on the X-ray machine and pulled me aside, put me in a little room with my coins and the rest of my stuff. Had an expert come in, and he went through my coins one by one. Probably 100, at least 100, maybe 150, 200. Found one that was over 50 years old, which was confiscated. Now, I was really glad that I hadn't bought any old, any old bronzes or anything, because they would have been left in the airport in Tashkent. But you can see some of the textiles and just beautiful work. Well, we've seen the market before. You'll see it again. This is the Chorsu Bazaar in Tashkent, one of the largest markets in Central Asia, and a lot of people selling a lot of stuff. Someplace in there, if I could blow it up, I'd probably find a fat-tailed sheep butt, like I talked about last time about fat-tailed sheep, about the food. You can see here, for example, cheeses. This is the cheese section. Back over in here is meat. The markets are often good for vegetables, and if you look at these potatoes, each one of these has been polished by hand.
Oh.
And it's really interesting to go into a market first thing in the morning when the vendors are setting up their stuff. You hear these people with a bin of cherries wiping the dust off of each individual cherry and arranging them. Tomatoes, anything like that. They take such pride in the appearance of their food. And you don't touch anything. They touch it for you. It's kind of like in Paris. You go in Paris, you pick up a piece of fruit. They don't like that. Well, they don't like that in Uzbekistan either. But anyhow, just to give you an idea, these are various kinds of potatoes here, tomatoes over here, and just beautiful, beautiful produce, and everybody's in the same area, as I've said before. They're selling the same kind of stuff. Now, one of the things that's really interesting about Tashkent is the metro system. And it's very similar to the metro system in Moscow. It's extensive. You can see here the map of the different routes. But the thing that's interesting are the stations, the subway stations. And if you've ever been to Moscow, I have not been, but the Moscow subway stations are famous for their architectural beauty. When I was there in 2014, you were not allowed to take pictures in the subway stations. They were considered to be off limits because they were designed to serve also as bomb shelters. When I went back in 2018, they lifted those restrictions. And it's interesting, when I've talked before, pointed out the difference in Uzbekistan between 2014 and 2018 in terms of encouragement of tourism, and this is just one example of this. So the last time I went back, I spent half a day just riding on the subway, jumping off at stations. It's 14 cents. That was what the fare was I don't know, 50 som or something like that. I don't know, I can't remember. It was equivalent to 14 cents. So this is a subway station. I can't remember the name of it. I'm just going to show you some examples of them to give you an idea of the fact that it ain't New York City or London. Another one. They're clean. They have police people standing around, waving the trains by and helping you out if you need help. Another one. Another one. And one of the most interesting ones to me, this is the one that's closest to the hotel where I stayed the last time I was there. This is the cosmonaut station. Okay. And so each one of these medallions represents Soviet cosmonauts. So it's a huge place, but the design, each one of them is a little bit different. And to say the thing that was interesting about this one was these bronze medallions of the Soviet cosmonauts. Another one, just the interesting light pictures here. And you can tell I didn't take these because there aren't any people there. Okay. These were taken during off hours. If we were taking them ourselves, there'd be lots of people around. So questions about Tashkent. Modern city, capital of the country, and very encouraging of tourists. Excellent metro system, and incredible growth. In terms of when I was there the first time, 4 years later, the number of buildings that had gone up, the number of little restaurants that had disappeared, become very much an international city, in a fascinating place. Yeah, Joe?
How long was Uzbekistan part of Russia?
How long was Uzbekistan part of Russia? From about the 1880s, and then particularly after the Bolshevik Revolution. So 1880s.
So all this stuff we're seeing was built during Russian influence?
No, a lot of this is more modern.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of this, we'll see more modern stuff. Some of it predates Russian, that you heard, like the mosque that I showed, but it's a mix.
How about the subway stations?
Subways was Soviet.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I should. The question was when did Uzbekistan become part of the Soviet Union? It was in stages. There were emirs that controlled different parts. There was an emir in Kokand, that should be the palace. Next week, I'll show you the Emir's Palace in Bukhara. All of these basically were conquered by the Russians and then became part of the Soviet Union. Yeah.
Is it oil rich and where does the water come from?
Is the oil rich and where does the water come from? The water comes from mountains. There are two major rivers, and I'm going to talk about that when I talk about the Aral Sea at the end. The water comes from mountains through two rivers, and they used to flow into the Aral Sea, but they don't anymore. But the mountain, oil, this they have oil. And they also have cotton. They have cotton, which you'll see in just a minute. Any other questions about Tashkent? So basically, a very modern city, modern infrastructure, incredibly friendly people. I found the Uzbek people to be very, very friendly. Most of them now speak English. Younger people speak English, so they are often very happy to practice their English.
So one could travel there today?
One can travel there today, yes. Uzbekistan, you can. I think Turkmenistan, you can't. I'll talk about that in 2 weeks. But Uzbekistan, it's very encouraging to tourists. I'm not sure what's happened post-COVID. I think it's probably pretty open. But tourism is encouraged. There are a number of tour companies that are very good about arranging tours. There's one out of Seattle, Mir. It's very high-end travel. The company that I dealt with the second time I went was a Bound Tour. And the change from 2014 to 2018 in terms of ease of access, in terms of getting a visa, in terms of crossing the border, all those things is very tourist friendly. Yes.
Do you need to be on a tour, or do people
You need
go
to be on a tour. Good point. In Uzbekistan, you do not need to be on a tour. In Turkmenistan, you have to have a guide. But in Uzbekistan, a lot of independent travelers. There's also trains. You can travel by train throughout the country now. You can take a spur off the Trans-Siberian Railway that goes through the north side, and so it's relatively easy. It's halfway around the world from here. So the first time I went by Istanbul on Turkish Airlines. Second time I went by Seoul on Korean Air. It's literally Tashkent is the major entree into Central Asia, and it's one of my favorite countries. Yeah, Courtney?
Doesn't it have an American embassy there?
Yes, it has an American embassy. It used to have American troops.
Yeah.
After 9/11, Uzbekistan was one of the favorite places for us to send troops and money, and they were supportive of that. They are very concerned about radical Islam. You cannot take any religious materials of any kind in or out of the country, and they're very concerned about religion, about Islam, but they're very restrictive of any kind of religious information. Back to the Fergana Valley, the estimates of how many people were killed in the religious conflict, the one in the 1990s, is anywhere from several hundred to several thousand. And the more recent things, there have been lots of people killed, which of course doesn't make arguments. Yeah.
What is their religion?
What is their religion? They're Islam. They're Muslim, but they tend to be more Sufi Muslim, less restrictive than some of the other Islamic groups. So it's predominantly, I don't know what the percentage is, probably 90% Islamic, but it's not radical Islam. And it's nothing like Wahhabis, say, in Saudi Arabia. And it is an Islamic country. Okay, well, here we go. Now we're going up to the northwest, to Nukus. And there's this shows you where Nukus is. So just to reorient us, here's the Fergana Valley where we started out. And this shows you how this weird assignment that had to do with epigraphs and geography, because these are mountains. So Tashkent's here, They were going up there in Nukus, up in the northwest. I love this quote. This is from Lonely Planet. There's a similar quote in the Odyssey Travel Guide. If desolation attracts you, welcome to the capital of Uzbekestan's Republic, Nukus. It's actually drab, impoverished, unhealthy, and forlorn. Its broad avenues and big public buildings now looking like jokes. The city's outskirts melt into scarred wastes where camels wander aimlessly. That was true probably 25 years ago. Now only about 80% of it's true. There's lots to see there. The reason I went was because I love Nukus. The reason I went was to go to this museum. This is the Svetsky Museum. This is right in the heart of downtown Nukus. This is a new building. This was built between the time I was there the first time and the second time. This is what it looks like now. And it's the home of the I.B. Savitsky Pakistan State Museum of Art. And there's an interesting movie called The Desert of Forbidden Art. If you have any interest in Soviet art or art history, I recommend it highly. It's a fascinating look at this museum and the guy who created it, Savitsky. This is he, I.B. Savitsky. And to make a long story short, he was an archaeologist and ethnographer who lived in Nukus, did archaeological excavations there, collected a lot of ethnographic materials like jewelry, costumes, and so on, and then started getting art that was not acceptable to the Soviets. And so basically during Soviet times there were restrictions on the kind of art that people could produce, what they were allowed to do. And a lot of people went underground. They buried or put their art, the forbidden kinds of art, into a shed in the backyard, buried it under the floorboards of their house. And Savitsky realized that there was this treasure trove of art produced both by Soviet and Uzbek artists, but particularly Soviet artists, in the 40s and 50s that started collecting it. And then he must have been an incredibly forceful guy, because he worked out to get the Uzbek government, Soviet government, to pay to build a museum for him. And it started out as an ethnographic museum where he had, Carpenter will share some of the ethnographic exhibits. But basically, he had all this art and finally got a place and was able to display it. I know nothing about Soviet art, but it's well worth a visit to get an idea of what one guy could do. Because basically what he did is he went around to people who he knew had been artists, or their husband had been an artist, or their wife had been an artist. They might have been killed during the Repression. And their art was rolled up and stored, like I say, in a woodshed or something like that. There's literally thousands and thousands of pieces of art and thousands of pieces of ethnographic material. So this is the entrance. This is the new entrance to the museum. Here is a full-size yurt in the museum. But the thing I particularly found interesting was the ethnographic materials that he had collected. And so you can see, it doesn't show up terribly well, but this is all jewelry.
It's all what?
Jewelry,
Oh.
gold. These are textiles here. But just this incredibly rich collection of ethnographic art from the region. You can see here some old metalware, an old picture. This is an old oil lamp. Here's a saddle. But just a woman wearing a typical Uzbek dress. It's the ikat material. Silk. That would be silk. This is a guide to the collection, homage to Savitsky, collecting 20th century Russian and Uzbek art. And just to give you an idea of what some of the galleries are like, if you like colorful stuff, it's pretty cool. It's got, sculptures, paintings, and so on. There's literally thousands of these saved. They would have been destroyed if the Soviets had found them. They would have all been destroyed. But he saved them and was able to develop this museum out there in the middle of nowhere. This is probably the most famous painting in the museum. It's the bull, and this is the icon, if you will, of the museum. But there's just gallery after gallery of art. I'm not sure, but I think foreigners have to have a guide when they visit the museum. I did both times I was there. And it's interesting to have a guide in the museum if they think you know something about what they're talking about. So it's like, well, you know the Soviet artist, well, this is his work. And you know Levitsky and this, well, I didn't. I appreciate it, but this is, as I say, this is Lysenko. The bull is the icon of the museum. Lots of paintings like this. There's, lots of color. I'm not sure why this wasn't acceptable, but it was either the artist wasn't acceptable or the piece of work itself wasn't. But this is some of the kinds of things that he rescued. Magic happens with this projector. It's just
What?
magic happens. Pictures, things disappear, but they reappear. So I'm going to leave Nukus. We're headed up to Maniak on the way to the Aral Sea. This is a Muslim cemetery right outside the town. You can see here the mausolea and the graves here. And on the way out of town, we did see camels wandering aimlessly through the streets. This was in 2014 when I went up to Aral Sea. Second time I went, I only went to Nukus and then went back to Tashkent. But the first time I went, I was there for two reasons. One was to see the museum, and the other was as a kickoff or a jumping off point for the Aral Sea. So let's travel to the Aral Sea. Any questions about Nukus, about the museum? So, the Aral Sea, what a story. Here's the way I got there. I got a guy with a Jeep, and we went from Nukus to Mzdar to here to Maniak. Here's the Aral Sea up here. Well, it used to be here. And so if you, this used to be, this used to be a fishing port. There were huge canneries there for fishing, processing fish from the Aral Sea. So here's where we are. Again, to orient you, we're up here now. Nukus is down down here. Tashkent's over here. And somebody asked about water. There are two major rivers in Central Asia, the Serdaya and Amudara, and they come from the water comes from these mountains, Tian Shan and the Pamirs. So rivers flowed from the mountains to the sea. Well, in their august wisdom, the Soviets decided that if they used a lot of water and a lot of chemicals, they could grow cotton. And so basically what happened was that huge cotton fields were established, and the cotton requires water, and it's a highly pesticide-intensive crop. And so basically they pulled the water out of those two rivers to irrigate cotton, and so the source of water for the Aral Sea dried up. So here's a cotton field. Here are happy Uzbek women picking cotton. There are a lot of issues around cotton in Uzbekistan, one of which was that it used to be that they made all government employees pick cotton. They closed the schools and made kids pick cotton. A lot of child labor. And when I went overland in 2014, you were not allowed to take pictures of cotton fields. Well, surreptitiously one can, but my guide would say, no pictures, no pictures, because of issues with exploitation of child labor. Well, so what happened was then, with all this cotton, water went to grow the cotton and didn't make it to the Aral Sea. So if you look, this is what it looked like in 1977. This is what it looked like in 1986. This is what it looked like in 1999. This is what it looked like in 2006, 2009, 2013, which was about the time I was there. It's basically disappeared. And they call it the disappearing Aral Sea. There's a fascinating book by an American Peace Corps volunteer about his experience in Uzbekistan. It's called Chasing the Sea. I can't remember what his name was, but it's a very interesting story that gets into the ecology. Again, this is one that you could easily spend a whole session talking about, in the point of view of the politics of it and the ecological impact. Here's what it looks like. It used to be fresh water. It used to have a lot of fish in it. Now it's salt flats, or a large portion of the salt flats, and desolation. Probably the most common image of the Aral Sea is the stranded fishing boats at Maniac. So this is where we went to see, and basically you have fishing boats that are sitting in the middle of the desert. It's just, you can get some impression of it from this, but to really see it, and there's a marker that's up on a hill that shows how the sea changed over time. And you look out over this, and it's just absolutely amazing. And the Russians basically did it. You know, what happened was that they had the Soviet government kept increasing the requirements for the amount of cotton that would be produced, and they increased, therefore, the cotton fields, took the water out of the rivers. The rivers didn't make it to the Aral Sea anymore, and this is the effect. So, I'm going to go back to Tashkent. Any questions about the Aral Sea? As I say, this is something that you could easily talk for hours on. Yeah, Al?
Any interest in restoring the Aral Sea?
The answer is, the question is there interest in restoring it? Yes. Kazakhstan, in fact, has, as you can see here, the Aral Sea, this is Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. This is nothing like it is now. This is the only part that's left. And Kazakhstan's put a dam there, and they're trying to build up there. And, but what you've got to do is you've got to get the rivers to flow again, which means you don't have cotton, and that's part of the major part of the economy. Yeah, Fred?
How large was the Aral Sea when it started?
That's like, it's like how high are the mountains? I really don't know, but if you look, let's just go back to this. I mean, it's probably, I would say probably 150 kilometers. It was big, yeah. But
Can you compare it to something? Can you compare it to something like a Great Lake or that we did have a perspective?
No,
No.
sorry.
Okay.
Learn how I'm saying to say I don't know.
I know, smart. Good for you.
The thing that's important here is the run. I mean, this is not a little puddle. I mean, this is it's probably 100 miles long and 50 miles wide at that, and here it's basically nothing. But you can see in Kazakhstan, they're trying to fill up this part right here.
Was the water fresh or salty?
It was originally fresh. Now it is salt. It's salt and chemicals. Good question. It was a freshwater sea, but with it's become saline. There are virtually no fish left in it. It's an ecological desert, and there had been a thriving fishing industry. If you look in the town of Moniac, there is a museum that shows pictures of the fish canneries and stuff like that, and there's no way, there's nothing there anymore. Yeah. So,
Original size of the Aral Sea,
Thank you.
26,000 square miles.
how many?
26,000.
26,000 square miles.
Square miles. Whoa.
That's, somebody do the math for me.
Just a square root.
That was pretty big.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. The wonderful world of Google.
That's right.
Anything else? Yeah,
Did they
Joe.
grow cotton all along those two rivers, or just up in that in that area?
They grow,
Grew
the
cotton
question is,
from
did
the-
they grow cotton all along the rivers? The answer is yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's basically intensive cotton production all along the rivers. It has the key thing is that it has to be irrigated. It's an irrigated crop. So they take the water out of the rivers to irrigate the fields. Yeah, good question. Yes.
I
Becky.
should have asked this question earlier. I was fascinated by the home of the Russian,
So,
the Jewish.
Barbara?
Go ahead, louder.
I was fascinated by the home of the Jewish merchant in the middle of,
Yeah.
was there a Jewish community?
Oh, I guess I thought I mentioned that. Sorry, I'll go back to that. We're very large Jewish communities in Tashkent, particularly in Bukhara. Most of the Bukhara Jews, I think there's like 50 or 60 left. They moved to Queens in New York, right? Large Bukhara Jewish population in Queens, so that most of the cities would have had a Jewish population, merchant class. In some ways, it's like Morocco in terms of predominantly Islamic population, but with a large Jewish population, yeah. And mostly merchant. Anything else, Susan?
I'm curious where our guests are from, which town or city?
I'm from Bukhara, or my family's from Bukhara.
Bukhara?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yes.
So I've just looked, the Chesapeake Bay covers 11,600 square miles.
So this is basically twice as big. That's Chesapeake Bay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Wow.
Was.
Was.
Yes.
It was, yeah.
Thanks.
Back
That's a steep
Okay. Yes, Alex?
When they close the school down, or schools down for children to make contact,
Mhm.
do you know how long that was?
The question, Alex's question was a good one. When they closed the school down for children to pick cotton, how long? I don't know how long, what the harvest season is. It's probably several weeks. It wouldn't be months, it'd probably be several weeks. Okay, so,
So is it 1977, is that pretty close to the original size?
yeah. So we're going to go back, we're going to go from Nukus back to Tashkent. Here's the beautiful Nukus airport. Not a lot there. When I was there, the second time I was there, I had a guide who spoke no English, who didn't really understand what it was that I was paying the tour company for him to do for me. So basically I kind of threw up my hands and said, okay, take me to the airport, which he understood. He's kind of so he took me to the airport 3.5 hours before my flight. I can assure you, you do not want to spend 3.5 hours in the Nukus airport. There's no vending, there's kind of vending machines. There's no cafe, and there's nobody that speaks English. But the people were really nice. They worried about me. I tried to talk to them, like, you know, and finally I got a soda or something. But I do not recommend 3 hours in Nukus airport. But I did manage to go from there to here. This is the domestic terminal at the airport in Tashkent. Really very modern. I mean, that's I don't know what it would have been like in Soviet days. I can't imagine it. But now the infrastructure is really pretty good. And then from Tashkent, we're going to take this train. This is a higher quality train than we have in America. This is the Aral Sea. It's a high-speed Spanish train, and we're going to go to Samarkand, and we'll go to Samarkand next week. So, in summary, we've looked at 4 areas. Al, you're waving?
Lady here.
I just wonder, is that a Japanese train?
No, it's Spanish. Aral Sea. It's Targa. Is it Targa, something like that. I think it's Spanish. It's high speed. They're 125, 30 miles an hour.
Can you tell us what the population is?
What the population of Tashkent's about, if I remember right, it's about 2.5 million. So it's it's the largest city in Central Asia, and I think 2 to 2.5 million is what comes to mind. Yeah.
What were the years that Timur lived?
Timur was in the 1400s, 15th century.
Thank you.
14, 15, around and there was a time he died. Timur was a major figure in the history of Central Asia.
Tamerlane was another name?
Tamerlane, yeah. His name was Timur. They called him Timur the Lame, and that became Tamerlane. And it can be spelled Timur, it can be Emir, Amir. It's one of those things that, for the most part, you can tell, but to be consistent, I have to remember that I'm saying A as opposed to E for Emir. Yeah, Margaret?
Yes, you said that the Aral Sea was pure, but when it comes back, it'll be salty. Where does the salt come from?
Salt comes any time. Well, I'm not a hydrogeologist, but I
Where's the
think
chemistry person?
the question is where the salt comes from. I think any time when water evaporates, it leaves the salts behind. So if you've got a high degree of evaporation or taking water away from a body of water, it evaporates and leaves minerals behind. And so it's not only salt, but it's pesticides as well, and fertilizer. Eric?
You showed us a lot of grandiose public buildings and impressive interiors. How about where people live? What's the average standard of living?
What's the standard of living? Well, I could take you down some back streets. Most people live in apartments. They've got large apartment buildings. They've got smaller residential areas, particularly the old Muslim area in Tashkent, small single-family houses along alleyways, but the majority of the population lives in apartments. Standard of living, I don't know how to judge that. You don't see people begging on the street. You don't see homeless people.
That isn't-
Susan says that doesn't mean there aren't any. Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yes, Donna?
Well, through all of these productions, I haven't seen any vehicles, any cars, any roads. What kind of transportation do they have?
That's a very good question. What kind of transportation do you have? You have old Russian cars and you have new cars. When I traveled the first time, I traveled by car because it was a small group of three of us. The driver, the guide, and my traveling companion and I. The roads vary from good pavement to, I've shown pictures of the desert roads. They're basically dirt going across the desert. There are cars. There is internal transportation by air. I flew from Tashkent to Nukus. I flew from Nukus back. I flew from Kiva to Tashkent. I flew from Ashgabat to Nukus in Turkmenistan. I flew from Mary to Ashgabat. So my travel was a combination of, and then train the last time, trained in Samarkand. You can travel by train. When I was there, I met people who were traveling throughout Central Asia by train. The railroads are pretty good. You saw the fast train. That fast train goes from Tashkent to Samarkand to Bukhara. You can go on from there. There are trains across Turkmenistan now. So it's a combination. But next week or in 2 weeks when I talk about Turkmenistan, I'll show you pictures of Ashgabat. There are a few cars. There are huge, broad highways and virtually no cars. People rely on public transport. Good question. So yes, there are people who live there in little houses down the lane, and there are highways, and some of which are more fun to drive on than others. So here's what we talked about today. I'll leave it with that, and thank you very much.
Thank you.